So there's a fantastic article written by Hutton Patterson explaining what the NBA over 38 rule is, and I just thought it was something that we should talk about. So, this is a channel that I like to cover every facet of the NBA, including the NBA draft, the NBA offseason, NBA previews, predictions, everything you can imagine, and including some European international basketball. But one thing I like to explain are rules and just terminology amongst the NBA that the average NBA fan might not understand, and I feel like it does help people get a better comprehension of the NBA so they can enjoy it even further, similar to how I do. So shout out Hutton Patterson for giving me the idea for this and providing the information. Link is in the description down below if you guys would like to read the article yourself. And guys, if The Athletic wants to, sponsor me, I would so do it. So the recent 2-year, $97.1 million contract extension that LeBron James signed with the Los Angeles Lakers was done because of the over 38 rule. So obviously there's some benefits of a short-term extension, and he kept the flexibility of a player option in 2024 to 2025, which would allow him to play with his son Bronny when the younger James is eligible to be drafted into the league. And the over 38 rule meant he had no choice but to do so. And what is the over 38 rule? So it's a provision in the most recent collective bargaining agreement that limits teams from offering contracts lasting 4 or more years to any player who's at least 38 years old or will turn 38 during the contract. This collective bargaining agreement by law initially began as the over 35 rule in 1995, agreed upon the NBA and the NBA Player Association, and eventually became the over 36. But in 2016, in the last round of talks, the NBA Player Association president, Chris Paul, successfully proposed to have the age limit pushed to 38. Why is LeBron James subject to the over 38 rule? Because LeBron will turn 38 on December 30th, making him ineligible to sign a deal for 4 or more years because his deal is an extension on his current contract, which ran through 2022 to 2023. So James couldn't sign more than a 2-year extension. Is there any way around this over 38 rule, if you're wondering? The only exception to the rule is if a player has his bird rights owned by the team and the player is 35 or younger before October 1st. Those contracts can last 1 year longer than if the team did not possess the player's bird rights. The reason that the October 1st is the date for that rather than opening night is because that marks the official beginning of the season for salary purposes. Any players whose 38th birthday falls after that date on the 4th year of their contract is not eligible to sign a 4-year deal unless their team has their bird rights. So now, if you guys don't know what bird rights is, Larry Bird is the guy who it's about. So the great little piece right here comes after Larry Bird, and it was introduced in the NBA to allow teams to have a hard cap, meaning no franchise would be allowed to spend more than the allotted amount. But they wanted to create an exception for Bird, who signed a 7-year, $15 million contract to stay in Boston. The deal at the time was considered to be massive. Since the league made an exception for Bird to remain with the Celtics, that created the exception for every team that you're allowed to go over the salary cap amount to keep a player who's been under contract for a certain amount of years. And I believe that the bird rights allow a team to exceed the salary cap to re-sign a player already on their team to first year salary up to the current league maximum. The caveat: they must have played for the team in each of the 3 consecutive seasons prior. And you can trade players with bird rights, and the bird rights do transfer to other teams. And the reason why this, the bird rights, will move past that just to fill out if anybody didn't know that. But the reason why the over 38 rule was introduced was to create an address for a contract loophole preventing front offices from exploiting salary cap space to offer more money over more years than they believe the player could play before retiring. It's also seen as a type of insurance that disincentivize players nearing retirement from seeking contracts that could potentially pay them past the time of their retirement. And why does this rule matter? It's really an obscure rule, as Chris Paul and LeBron are the only 2 guys. And Kevin Durant was eligible for an extension with Brooklyn, but he could only sign 4 years because he turns 37 during the final year of his contract, and couldn't sign a 5-year deal because he had only played 2 years with Brooklyn. And so Chris Paul and LeBron are the only 2 guys on the over 38 deals, because this is one that is a rule that players and agents must be mindful when looking to secure long-term lucrative deals, because the ramifications for team building based on age and the amount of money a franchise can offer a player in a contract negotiation can depend on it. So like, you know, right here, Kevin Durant was, you know, offered an extension, and the decision had lasting ramifications because Durant avoided signing that 4-year extension. He may have been able to leave the Nets in free agency rather than having to demand a trade. Okay. And it's just on the flip side, you see the Phoenix Suns and Paul agreed to a 4-year, $120 million deal the same offseason. And that deal's going to expire when he's 40 and was eligible to sign the 4 years because the Suns had his bird rights since Paul came to the Suns via trade while he was on an existing long-term deal, which meant, you know, when he was traded from the Houston to Phoenix. So, and he was 35, which means the Suns had his bird rights so they could adhere to the over-38 rule and pay him until he was 40, unlike the Brooklyn Nets were able to do with Kevin Durant.